Who is there? Come out.
I walked into my daughter's kitchen and heard words that shattered my entire world. Once Mom dies, we split everything. My own daughter, talking about my death, planning for it, like I was already gone. And I just stood there, frozen in the doorway, my hand still on the knob, listening to my children discuss the division of my life like vultures circling something already dead. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, because you need to understand how I got to that moment, how a mother who gave everything ended up standing in a doorway, invisible to her own children, listening to them plan her funeral before she was even sick. My name is Margaret, and I'm 73 years old. I raised 3 children on my own after my husband Robert passed away when I was just 48. 25 years of being both mother and father. 25 years of sacrificing, working 2 jobs, missing sleep, skipping meals so they could have everything they needed, everything they wanted.
And then Grandma said the chicken crossed the road just to get away from you.
My oldest, Jennifer, she's 50 now, married to a man named Greg who works in finance. They live in that big house in the suburbs with the perfectly manicured lawn and the 2-car garage. The house I helped them buy with my retirement savings when they said they were struggling with the down payment. My middle child, David, he's 47. He's got his own business now, a consulting firm that does something with technology I still don't fully understand. But I do understand that when he started that business 8 years ago, he needed $50,000 to get it off the ground. $50,000 I gave him from the sale of the house Robert and I built together. And my youngest, Sarah, she's 43. She married young, had 2 kids right away, and when her husband left her 6 years ago, who do you think took her in? Who do you think helped raise those grandkids while she got back on her feet? Who paid for the lawyer when she needed to fight for custody? Me. Always me. I never asked for anything back. I never kept score. That's what mothers do, right? We give and give and give because that's what love looks like. That's what I believed. That's what I spent my entire life believing until 3 weeks ago when everything I thought I knew about my children crumbled in the space of a 15-minute conversation I was never supposed to hear. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late October. I remember because the leaves were just starting to turn that brilliant orange-red that Robert always loved. I'd taken the bus to Jennifer's house because she'd invited me for lunch, just a casual lunch, she'd said on the phone. "Come over Tuesday, Mom, we'll catch up." I should have known something was off. Jennifer never just invited me over for lunch anymore. These days, our interactions were quick coffee dates or phone calls that lasted exactly 7 minutes before she had to run to some appointment or meeting. But I was so happy to hear from her, so desperate for that connection with my daughter, that I didn't question it. I took 2 buses to get there. I don't drive anymore, haven't since the accident 3 years ago. Nothing serious, just a fender bender, but it scared me enough that I turned in my license. The kids were relieved, I could tell. One less thing to worry about with Mom, right? The bus ride took 45 minutes each way. I didn't mind. I brought a book and watched the scenery change from my neighborhood of modest houses and corner stores to Jennifer's world of gates and gardeners and houses that look like they belong in magazines. When I got to her house, I rang the doorbell like I always do. I used to have a key years ago, but Jennifer had the locks changed 2 years back. Security upgrade, she'd said. She never gave me a new key. I told myself it was fine. I told myself a lot of things were fine. Jennifer answered the door with that smile. You know the one. The smile that doesn't reach the eyes. The smile that says, I'm being polite, instead of, I'm happy to see you. Mom, hi, she said, and she hugged me, but it was that quick pat, pat, pat hug. The kind you give someone you're obligated to hug, not the kind you give someone you love. But I hugged her back tight. I always do, because maybe if I love her enough, if I show her enough affection, she'll remember how to love me back the way she used to, when she was little and would run into my arms and squeeze my neck and say, I love you, Mommy, without me having to ask. She led me inside, and I noticed immediately how beautiful her house was. New furniture in the living room, one of those huge televisions that takes up the entire wall, fresh flowers in a crystal vase on the hall table, everything perfect, everything expensive. Your home is so lovely, sweetheart, I said, because I'm her mother and I'm proud of her success, even if that success came partly from my retirement fund. Thanks, she said, already walking toward the kitchen. I just had the decorator refresh everything. Cost a fortune, but Greg insisted. Cost a fortune. I smiled and nodded, thinking about my own apartment, the one-bedroom place I moved to after selling the family house, the place where the heat doesn't work great, and the neighbors are loud, and the elevator breaks down twice a month. But it's what I can afford on my Social Security check and the tiny bit I have left saved. We walked into her kitchen, and let me tell you about this kitchen. It's bigger than my entire apartment. Marble countertops, commercial-grade appliances, one of those refrigerators that has a screen on the front where you can watch TV or look up recipes, the kind of kitchen I used to dream about having when I was raising 3 kids in a house with counters I installed myself from a kit I bought on sale. Sit down, Mom, Jennifer said, gesturing to the breakfast nook. I've got soup heating up, tomato bisque from that gourmet place downtown. I sat where she pointed, in that breakfast nook with the cushions that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and I waited. I've gotten good at waiting. Waiting for phone calls that don't come, waiting for visits that get canceled, waiting for my children to remember I exist. Jennifer busied herself at the stove, her back to me. So how are you, Mom? She asked, but she said it in that distracted way, the way you ask someone when you don't really want to know the answer. I'm fine, sweetheart. My knee's been acting up a bit, but that's just age. Nothing to worry about. She said. Not, what's wrong with your knee, or have you seen a doctor, or is there anything I can do? Just, We sat in silence for a moment. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall, one of those expensive designer clocks that cost $300 to tell you the same time a $20 clock would. Jennifer, I started, because the silence was crushing me. I was thinking maybe next week I could babysit Emma and Jake, give you and Greg a night out. I haven't seen the kids in almost 2 months. She turned around then, the soup ladle in her hand, and her face had that expression, the one I've learned to dread, the expression that says, here comes an excuse. Oh, Mom, that's sweet, but the kids are so busy right now. Emma has soccer and debate team, and Jake's got that new tutor 3 times a week. Plus, they're teenagers now. They barely want to be home anyway. Teenagers, as if being teenagers means they don't need their grandmother, as if being busy means there's no room for family. Maybe I could just come for dinner one night. I could cook that pot roast the kids used to love, remember? With the carrots and... We're really trying to eat healthier these days, Mom. Greg's on this new diet and the kids are so picky now. But thank you. Thank you. Like I was a stranger offering to help. Like I wasn't the woman who raised her. Like I wasn't the grandmother of her children. I swallowed the lump in my throat and smiled. Of course, honey. Whatever works for you. She brought the soup over. 2 bowls of that expensive tomato bisque. Mine had a tiny garnish on top, some kind of herb I didn't recognize. Fancy food for a lunch I didn't realize would be the last normal moment before my world fell apart. We were about halfway through the soup when Jennifer's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and her whole face changed, lit up in a way it hadn't when she saw me at the door. "It's David," she said, standing up. "I need to take this. We've been playing phone tag all week." She answered as she walked toward the kitchen doorway. "David, hi. Hold on one second. Let me just..." She put her hand over the phone and looked at me. "Mom, I'm going to take this in the living room, okay? I'll just be a few minutes." And she was gone before I could respond, just like that. Left me sitting alone in that big, beautiful kitchen with my half-eaten soup and my growing sense that something was wrong. Something had been wrong for a while, but I'd been too afraid to see it. I sat there for maybe a minute, eating slowly, trying not to feel like I was in the way in my own daughter's home, trying not to feel like the inconvenience I was clearly becoming. That's when I heard it. Jennifer's voice, coming from somewhere not quite far enough away. She must have been in the living room or maybe the hallway, close enough that her voice carried back to the kitchen, close enough that I could hear every word. "No, she's here now. I invited her over like we discussed." My spoon stopped halfway to my mouth. Like we discussed. Who was we? Discussed what? I put the spoon down carefully, trying not to make noise. My heart was starting to beat faster. That instinct, that mother's instinct that tells you something is very wrong, was screaming at me. I know, Jennifer continued, and her voice had that edge to it, that impatient edge that's become so familiar in the last few years. But we couldn't all come over at once. That would be too obvious. This way I can feel her out, see where her head's at. Feel me out? Where my head's at? About what? I stood up slowly, my chair making the smallest scraping sound against the hardwood floor. I moved toward the kitchen doorway, staying quiet, staying hidden. My whole body was tense. Part of me knew I should announce myself, should call out, should stop this right now before I heard something I couldn't unhear. But a bigger part of me knew that if I stopped this now, I'd never know the truth, and the truth was coming whether I was ready for it or not. "David, relax. She doesn't suspect anything. She's just happy to be included for once," Jennifer laughed. Actually laughed. "I swear she's like a puppy, just grateful for any attention." The words hit me like a physical blow. I grabbed the door frame to steady myself. A puppy, grateful for attention. Is that what I'd become to my daughter? Something pathetic to be pitied? "Look," Jennifer continued, and her voice dropped lower. I had to strain to hear. "We need to start having these conversations. She's 73, David. Dad's been gone for 25 years. We need to be realistic about the timeline here." Timeline? Timeline for what? My hands were shaking now, actually shaking. I pressed them against the wall to steady myself, leaning closer to the doorway, every cell in my body screaming at me to run, to leave, to not hear what came next. but I couldn't move. I was frozen there, a ghost in my own daughter's house, listening to her discuss me like I was already dead. "I know Sarah's been difficult about this," Jennifer said, her voice sharp now. "But she needs to understand that just because Mom lived with her for a while doesn't mean she gets a bigger share. If anything, she should get less since Mom was paying her rent." Shares. They were talking about shares, dividing something. Dividing what? Dividing me. The house alone would have been worth close to $400,000 if she hadn't sold it and given you that money for your business, Jennifer continued. And now her voice was bitter, actually bitter. "I still don't understand why she gave you $50,000. You're not even the oldest." I felt like I was drowning, like all the air had been sucked out of the room. The house, the money, they were tallying it up, calculating it, resenting it. And don't even get me started on the college fund she blew through for Sarah's kids. $200,000 for private school? They could have gone to public school like everyone else. $200,000. It wasn't even close to that much, but she'd rounded up, made it sound worse, made my love for my grandchildren sound like a waste. "No, I'm not being cold, David. I'm being practical. Someone has to be. Once Mom dies, we split everything, the life insurance, the savings, whatever's left. But Sarah seems to think that because Mom helps with the grandkids, she deserves more. That's not how inheritance works." Once Mom dies, we split everything. The words echoed in my head, bouncing around like shards of glass. Once Mom dies, not if, when. Not just planning for my death, but discussing it like it was an upcoming event, like it was a business transaction. My daughter was on the phone with my son, discussing my death and how to divide whatever I left behind, and I was standing there, very much alive, listening to every word. "Shh, I think we need to get her to meet with an estate lawyer," Jennifer said, and I could hear her pacing now, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. "Someone who can help her set things up properly, make sure everything's clear. The last thing we need is for this to turn into a mess after she's gone." After she's gone, like it was inevitable, like it was soon. I don't know, maybe another 10 years? She's pretty healthy, but she's also 73 and living alone in that terrible apartment. The stress of that can't be good for her. And honestly, David, I don't think she's taking very good care of herself. I wanted to scream. I wanted to burst through that doorway and confront her. I wanted to shake her and ask her how she could say these things, how she could think these things about her own mother. But I didn't. I couldn't, because if I did, she'd know I'd heard. And somehow, some part of me needed to hear the rest, needed to know exactly how far this went, how bad it really was. "Look, I agree we should make sure she's comfortable. I'm not a monster, David, but we also need to be smart. The more she spends now, the less there is later. Simple math." Simple math. My life, my final years, reduced to simple math. "Okay, but here's what I think we should do," Jennifer continued, and her voice took on that businesslike tone she probably used in meetings. "We start having the conversations now, gentle ones, obviously. We talk to her about making sure she has her affairs in order. We help her find a good lawyer. We make sure the will is ironclad so there's no confusion later. She paused, listening to whatever David was saying on the other end. Yes, I'll bring it up today if I can find the right moment. I'll frame it as, we're just worried about you, Mom, and we want to make sure everything's taken care of. She'll eat it up. She always does when we pretend to care. Pretend to care. Those three words destroyed something in me that can never be repaired. My daughter thought she was pretending to care about me, which meant every phone call, every text message, every "How are you, Mom?" for the past, how long? Years? They were all fake, all performance, all her going through the motions of being a daughter while waiting for me to die so she could collect her inheritance. I think I made a sound. A small gasp, maybe, or maybe a sob, I'm not sure. But something came out of me, some physical manifestation of the pain that was tearing through my chest, because Jennifer suddenly stopped talking. There was silence, complete silence, and in that silence I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. "Hold on," Jennifer said quietly into the phone, too quietly, the way you talk when you think someone might be listening. I heard footsteps, quick footsteps, coming toward the kitchen. I had maybe 3 seconds to make a decision. Do I confront her? Do I run? Do I pretend I heard nothing? I chose the worst option, or maybe the only option I was capable of in that moment. I stood there, right there in the kitchen doorway, and I looked at my daughter as she came around the corner, phone still in her hand, and watched her face transform when she saw me. The color drained from her face, her mouth opened slightly, her eyes went wide. She knew. In that instant, she knew that I'd heard everything. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. Mother and daughter, 73 and 50, a lifetime of history between us. And in that moment, I could see it all unraveling. Every memory, every moment, every time I thought she loved me. All of it crumbling under the weight of what I'd just heard. "Mom," she finally said, and her voice cracked. "How long have you been? I didn't realize you were standing here," I finished for her, surprised by how steady my voice sounded, how cold. "Long enough, Jennifer, long enough to hear everything." She lowered the phone slowly. I could hear David's tinny voice still coming from the speaker, asking what was wrong, what was happening. She raised it back to her ear. "I'll call you back," she said quietly, and ended the call. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the refrigerator humming, the clock ticking, my own breath shallow and quick. "Mom, that wasn't," she started, but I held up my hand. "Don't," I said, and the word came out harder than I intended. "Don't you dare tell me that wasn't what it sounded like. I heard every word, Jennifer, every single word." Her face flushed red. "You were eavesdropping. I was eating soup in your kitchen. You're the one who decided to discuss my death and your inheritance while I was sitting 20 feet away." She had the grace to look ashamed, at least, for about 3 seconds. Then her expression shifted, hardened, became defensive. "We were just being practical, Mom. These are conversations that need to happen." "Practical," I repeated, and I felt something like hysterical laughter bubbling up in my chest. "You were calculating how much you'd inherit? You were discussing the timeline of my death? You told your brother that you pretend to care about me. That's not practical, Jennifer. That's cruel. I didn't mean it like that, she said, but her voice was weak. She knew she was caught. She knew there was no way to spin this. How did you mean it then? I demanded. Tell me, explain to me how you meant it when you compared me to a puppy grateful for attention. Explain how you meant it when you said you need to be realistic about the timeline. Explain how you meant it when you complained about the money I gave your brother, the house I sold, the college fund I contributed to Sarah's kids. Explain all of that to me, sweetheart, because I'm having a really hard time understanding. My voice was rising now. All those years of swallowing my feelings, of accepting whatever crumbs they threw my way, of telling myself it was fine, it was all fine. They were busy, they were adults with their own lives. All of it was boiling over. You want to know what hurts the most? I continued, and I was crying now, tears streaming down my face, but I didn't care. It's not even the money. I gave you that money freely. I gave David his money freely. I sold my house, the house your father and I built, because I wanted to help my children. I never expected anything back. That's what parents do. What hurts, I said, my voice breaking, is that you think I'm stupid. You think I don't notice that you never call unless you need something. You think I don't notice that I haven't seen my grandchildren in 2 months. You think I don't notice that every time I invite myself over, you have an excuse. But I told myself, they're busy, Margaret. They're adults. They have their own lives. I made excuses for you because I'm your mother, and that's what mothers do. We make excuses for our children because we love them more than they could ever love us back. Jennifer's eyes were shiny now, tears forming. That's not fair. Fair? I laughed, and it was a bitter sound. You want to talk about fair? Is it fair that I worked 2 jobs to raise you after your father died? Is it fair that I put my entire life on hold so you could have everything you needed? Is it fair that I gave you my retirement savings for your down payment, gave David $50,000 for his business, gave Sarah a place to live and helped raise her children, and all I asked in return was to be part of your lives? Was any of that fair, Jennifer? She opened her mouth, closed it again. What could she say? There was no defense. You know what really kills me? I continued, wiping my face with the back of my hand. It's that you couldn't even wait until I was actually gone to start dividing up my things. You're planning my estate while I'm still here, still alive, still your mother. We were just trying to be prepared, she said weakly, just trying to make sure there wouldn't be any confusion later. Later? I shook my head. Later when? You seem to think you had it all figured out. 10 more years, you said, maybe 10 more years of your mother's life, and you said it like you were discussing the warranty on a car, like I'm just this thing that's going to expire soon, and you want to make sure you get the most value out of me before I do. Jennifer's face crumbled then. She started crying, really crying, mascara running down her cheeks. Mom, please, you're taking this all wrong. I love you. We all love you. Do you? I asked quietly. Because love doesn't sound like that, Jennifer. Love doesn't calculate and plan and scheme. Love doesn't count the money it's given and resent it. Love doesn't pretend. We're not pretending, she insisted, but even she didn't sound convinced. Then tell me the truth, I said, looking her straight in the eyes. When was the last time you called me because you actually wanted to talk to me, not because you needed something, not because it was my birthday or a holiday, but just because you missed your mother and wanted to hear her voice. When was the last time you invited me over without an ulterior motive? When was the last time you looked at me and saw a person instead of an inconvenience or an inheritance? She opened her mouth, closed it, couldn't answer, because we both knew the truth. "That's what I thought," I said softly. The kitchen suddenly felt too small, too hot, too suffocating. I needed to leave. I needed to get out of there before I completely fell apart. I walked past her, grabbed my purse from where I'd left it on the breakfast nook bench. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get my coat on. "Mom, wait," Jennifer called after me. "Please don't leave like this. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about what?" I turned around at the front door. "You've already said everything I needed to hear. You and David have it all figured out. You don't need me for this conversation. You just need me to die so you can have it." "That's not... Mom, please. You're my mother. I love you." I looked at her one more time, really looked at her. This woman I'd raised, this woman I'd sacrificed everything for, this stranger who looked like my daughter but had the heart of someone I didn't know at all. "You know what's funny?" I said, my hand on the doorknob. "I spent my whole life teaching you about love, about family, about taking care of the people who matter. And somehow you learned none of it. Or maybe you learned it and just decided I wasn't worth it. I'm not sure which is worse." "Mom!" But I was already out the door, down her perfect walkway, past her perfect lawn, away from her perfect house with its perfect furniture and its imperfect daughter who was calling my name from the doorway. I kept walking. I didn't look back.